It all began when a memory card surfaced 3 years after the photographer stopped existing in any official capacity. Marcus Talbot was a freelance nature photographer based in Branson, Missouri, who specialized in documenting the remote hollows and limestone outcrops of the Arkansas-Missouri Ozark region. He worked alone, preferred backwoods access roads to marked trails, and maintained minimal contact with editors during his field assignments. In late September 2010, he informed his occasional collaborator at Midwest Wilderness magazine that he would be spending approximately 2 weeks in the Boston Mountains region of northwest Arkansas, targeting fall foliage compositions near the Buffalo National River corridor. His truck, a 1998 Ford Ranger with Missouri plates, was scheduled to return to Branson by October 9th. It did not. The truck was located on October 14th by a county maintenance crew clearing brush along County Road 3435, a narrow gravel road that winds through Newton County, Arkansas, approximately 11 miles from the nearest incorporated town. The vehicle sat 50 yards off the road in a clearing surrounded by oak hickory forest. The driver's door was closed but unlocked. The keys remained in the ignition. Talbot's camping gear, his tent, sleeping bag, portable stove, and water filtration system were neatly arranged in the truck bed beneath a weatherproof tarp. His wallet, containing his driver's license and $63 in cash, was found in the glove compartment alongside a spiral notebook filled with location coordinates and lighting notes. What was missing was more telling. His primary camera body, a Canon EOS 5D, was gone. So were his 3 lenses, his tripod, and his weatherproof camera bag. Searchers recovered his cell phone from the front seat. The battery was dead. When charged and examined by investigators, the call log showed no outgoing activity after September 27th. The last text message he sent, time-stamped at 4:17 p.m. that day, read simply, "Found something. Will explain when I get signal." Initial search efforts focused on a 2-mile radius surrounding the truck. The terrain in this part of the Ozarks is characterized by steep ridges, narrow valleys, sinkholes, and exposed karst formations. Ground visibility is limited by dense undergrowth and second-growth hardwoods. Canopy cover is thick even in autumn. Searchers found no clothing, no equipment, no footprints leading away from the clearing. They found no signs of struggle or disturbance inside the vehicle. After 7 days, the official search was suspended due to resource limitations and lack of actionable leads. The case was classified as a voluntary missing person. Talbot had no criminal record, no known debts, and no family dependencies. Investigators theorized he had walked into the forest and become disoriented or injured, though this failed to account for why he would have taken thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment with him on what should have been a short hike from a secured vehicle. The case file was transferred to the inactive queue in early November. The family, consisting of an elderly mother in Springfield and a sister in Kansas City, hired a private investigator who conducted a brief independent search and reached no new conclusions. By the end of 2010, Marcus Talbot was catalogued as one more name in the state's growing list of unsolved disappearances. Then, in June 2012, a hiker discovered a damaged SD memory card lodged in the crevice of a limestone bluff approximately 4 miles northeast of where Talbot's truck had been found. The card was partially corroded and water damaged, but forensic data recovery specialists in Little Rock were able to extract 17 image files. 16 of them were landscape photographs consistent with Talbot's documented work. The 17th image, time-stamped at 11:53 p.m. on September 28, 2010, showed something else entirely. The Ozark Mountains are not mountains in the conventional sense. They are an eroded plateau, a dissected upland of ancient sedimentary rock carved into ridges and hollows by millions of years of water action. The Boston Mountains, the highest and most rugged section of the Ozarks, run east to west across northern Arkansas. Elevations reach 2,500 feet, but relief is dramatic due to the depth of the valleys. Streams cut through limestone and dolomite bedrock, carving caves, sinkholes, and underground drainage systems that riddle the region. The forest is predominantly oak and hickory, mixed with shortleaf pine on drier ridges and sycamore in the bottoms. In autumn, the canopy turns rust and amber, but the understory remains thick with greenbrier, dogwood, and young cedars that obscure sightlines and deaden sound. Newton County, where Talbot's truck was found, covers 733 square miles and holds fewer than 8,000 residents. Much of the county is national forest land or privately held timber tracts. Roads are few and often unmaintained. Cell service is non-existent across most of the region. The nearest hospital is in Harrison, over 30 miles to the north. The nearest state police barracks is in Mountain View, 26 miles east. Response time for emergency calls in the backcountry routinely exceeds 90 minutes. County Road 3435 is not marked on most maps. It connects no towns. It serves as an access route for a handful of hunting camps, a decommissioned fire tower, and several parcels of forested land held by absentee owners. The road was paved decades ago but has deteriorated into gravel and exposed bedrock. Locals refer to it as the back way to nowhere. Timber companies used it in the 1970s. Now, it is driven primarily during deer season or by those who prefer not to be seen. The clearing where Talbot parked his truck is not a developed site. It appears to have been used intermittently for equipment staging or overnight stops. Tire ruts and flattened vegetation suggest prior use, but there are no fire rings, no litter, no permanent structures. The clearing is bordered on 3 sides by dense forest, and on the 4th by a limestone outcrop that rises nearly vertical for 40 feet. Behind that outcrop, the ridgeline continues northeast, climbing toward a series of unnamed peaks and hollows that have no trails and no official designations. Topographic maps show contour lines compressed into near-vertical bands. Satellite imagery from 2010 shows unbroken forest canopy. The area where the memory card was later recovered is locally referred to as Cutter's Bluff, though the name does not appear on U.S. Geological Survey maps. The bluff is a prominent limestone face that overlooks a tributary of Big Creek. Access is difficult. The base of the bluff is surrounded by talus slopes and thick brush. The top can be reached only by scrambling up a loose rock chute or by descending from the ridgeline above. There is no reason for a photographer to be there at night unless he was not there by choice or unless he was documenting something that required concealment. Interviews conducted in 2012 after the memory card was found revealed that several residents in the area had reported unusual vehicle activity along County Road 3435 in the weeks surrounding Talbot's disappearance. A retired schoolteacher living 3 miles west of the clearing told investigators she had seen headlights moving slowly along the road on 2 consecutive nights in late September, well after dark. She found this unusual because the road dead ends 5 miles further in and serves no residential addresses. A man who operates a small sawmill on a tributary road reported seeing a dark-colored SUV with out-of-state plates parked near the fire tower access around the same time. He did not record the plate number and could not recall the state. When asked why he remembered the vehicle, he said only that it was not a model he recognized and that the occupants did not acknowledge him when he drove past. Another detail emerged from a review of county records. In early 2010, a corporate entity registered in Delaware had purchased 120 acres of forested land approximately 2 miles north of where Talbot's truck was found. The parcel was landlocked, accessible only by a gated logging road that branched off County Road 3435. The corporation's name, listed in the deed as Belknap Resource Holdings LLC, had no website, no listed phone number, and no business address beyond a registered agent in Wilmington. The property was classified as unimproved timberland. No building permits were ever filed. No utilities were connected. By the time investigators attempted to locate representatives of Belknap Resource Holdings in 2012, the corporation had been dissolved and its records sealed under a confidentiality agreement that could not be accessed without a court order. The landscape itself seems to resist clarity. The karst topography creates natural dead zones where sound does not travel and where visibility is measured in yards, not miles. In autumn, the leaf fall muffles footsteps. In spring, the runoff carves new channels and washes away traces. The caves and sinkholes that puncture the plateau swallow objects, animals, and occasionally people, delivering them into underground systems that have never been fully mapped. It is a region where things can be hidden with little effort and where the forest returns quickly to erase evidence of human presence. The 17th image was taken with a telephoto lens set to 200 millimeters focal length. The exposure settings indicate low light conditions and a high ISO, suggesting the camera was operating near the limits of its sensor capability. The image is grainy and slightly out of focus, consistent with a handheld shot taken without stabilization. The timestamp embedded in the file metadata reads 23:53:07 on September 28, 2010. The location data embedded in some of Talbot's earlier images suggests he was moving northeast from his truck throughout September 27th and into the 28th. But the damaged memory card contained no GPS coordinates for the final photograph. The image shows 4 human figures in a clearing surrounded by trees. The clearing is illuminated by artificial light, likely from vehicle headlights positioned outside the frame. 3 of the figures are standing. 1 is bent forward in a posture that suggests physical exertion. The 4th figure is on the ground, partially obscured by the others. In the foreground, just visible at the bottom edge of the frame, is the corner of what appears to be a tarp or heavy fabric. To the left, a tool with a long handle, possibly a shovel, leans against a tree trunk. The figures are wearing dark clothing. Their faces are not visible, either turned away from the camera or obscured by shadow and the limitations of the image resolution. What drew immediate attention was not the figures, but the ground. The soil in the clearing appears disturbed. A rectangular section, roughly 6 feet in length, shows freshly turned earth distinct from the surrounding leaf litter. The edges of the disturbed area are sharp, suggesting recent excavation. The angle of the shot, taken from an elevated position, suggests Talbot was concealed above the clearing, possibly on an outcrop or elevated ridge. The depth of field and the framing indicate he was at least 50 yards from the subjects, possibly farther. Forensic image analysts hired by the family in 2012 attempted to enhance the photograph. They were able to confirm the presence of at least 2 vehicles parked outside the frame based on the pattern of light and shadow. They identified the tool as consistent with a standard long-handled spade. They could not identify the figures. Clothing details were insufficient. No faces were captured. No license plates were visible. One analyst noted that the position of the figure on the ground suggested it was not participating voluntarily in the activity, and that the posture of the standing figures suggested coordinated effort rather than casual activity. Investigators from the Arkansas State Police reviewed the image in August 2012. They initiated a search of the area surrounding Cutter's Bluff, where the memory card had been found. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Ground-penetrating radar was used in areas where the terrain permitted vehicle access. No graves were located. No human remains were recovered. The operation lasted 5 days. Soil samples taken from suspected disturbance sites showed no chemical markers associated with decomposition. The search was concluded without findings. Attempts to identify the clearing shown in the photograph met with limited success. Geospatial analysts compared the tree line, the rock formations visible in the background, and the topography to satellite imagery and topographic maps. The analysis suggested the clearing was located somewhere within a 3-square-mile area, northeast of County Road 3435, encompassing both national forest land and the privately held parcel purchased by Belknap Resource Holdings. Ground searches of accessible areas within that zone found multiple clearings of similar size and configuration. None matched the photograph with sufficient certainty to warrant excavation. A review of missing persons reports filed in Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma in the months surrounding September 2010 identified 43 individuals who disappeared without resolution. Investigators cross-referenced these cases with known criminal activity, land transactions, and reports of unusual behavior in Newton County and adjacent counties. No definitive connections emerged. 2 cases were flagged for further review based on timing and geographic proximity. The first involved a man from Tulsa who failed to return from a fishing trip to the Buffalo National River in mid-September. His vehicle was found at a public access point 30 miles south of Talbot's truck. His body was recovered from the river 6 weeks later. The medical examiner ruled the death accidental drowning. The second case involved a woman from Fayetteville who was reported missing by her employer in early October. She was located alive in Texas 2 months later and declined to provide details about her absence. Neither case was pursued further. The absence of remains was not conclusive. The Ozark region contains thousands of caves, sinkholes, and underground voids. Unmarked graves in remote forest land can remain undetected indefinitely, particularly in areas with no trails, no regular human traffic, and dense vegetation. Wildlife activity, soil acidity, and seasonal flooding can accelerate decomposition and scatter remains. Investigators acknowledge that the photograph, while disturbing, did not constitute proof of a crime. It documented an event that could not be located, participants who could not be identified, and a victim, if that is what the figure on the ground was, who could not be named. What remained undeniable was that Marcus Talbot had witnessed something that compelled him to document it under conditions that required concealment and significant personal risk. He had taken the photograph at night from a concealed position using equipment that would have been conspicuous if discovered. And within hours or days of taking that photograph, he and all his equipment vanished from a region where disappearances, while not common, are also not investigated with urgency. The Arkansas State Police Cold Case Unit formally reopened the Talbot file in September 2012. 3 years and 1 month after his disappearance, the assignment went to Detective Bryce Harden, a 22-year veteran who had worked previous cases in Newton and surrounding counties. Harden's initial review noted significant gaps in the original investigation. The truck had not been processed for fingerprints beyond the interior surfaces. The clearing where it was parked had not been photographed comprehensively. No attempt had been made to canvass nearby properties, in part because there were so few, and in part because the case had been classified as low priority. Harden began by re-interviewing the individuals who had reported unusual vehicle activity in late September 2010. The retired schoolteacher repeated her account of nighttime headlights, but could provide no additional details. The sawmill operator initially agreed to a second interview, but then declined, stating through his attorney that he had no further information and did not wish to be contacted again. Harden found this response unusual, but had no grounds to compel cooperation. A third individual, a man who lived off a side road branching from County Road 3435, told Hardin he had heard what sounded like a diesel engine running for an extended period on the night of September 28th, sometime after 10 p.m. He had not reported this in 2010 because he assumed it was related to logging activity, which was not uncommon in the area despite the late hour. Hardin requested all available records related to the parcel purchased by Belknap Resource Holdings. He discovered that the property had changed hands twice since 2010, passing through 2 additional shell companies before being sold in 2011 to a timber investment group based in Little Rock. The current owners reported no structures on the land and no knowledge of prior activity. Hardin obtained permission to access the property and conducted a walkthrough in October 2012. He found no roads, no trails, no evidence of recent human presence. The property was heavily forested with steep slopes and no clearings large enough to match the photograph. He noted, however, that portions of the parcel were inaccessible without specialized equipment, and that his survey covered less than 30% of the total acreage. Attempts to trace the ownership of Belknap Resource Holdings led to a registered agent in Delaware who referred inquiries to a law firm in Little Rock. The law firm acknowledged representing the entity during the 2010 land purchase, but stated that all records related to the transaction had been destroyed after the statutorily required retention period. The attorney who handled the purchase had retired and declined to be interviewed. Hardin submitted a request to the Delaware Secretary of State for Incorporation Records and received a standard filing document listing no officers, no directors, and no business address beyond the registered agent. Phone records for Talbot's cell phone showed no unusual activity in the days leading up to his disappearance. The last call he made was to his sister on September 25th. The last text message he received was from his editor on September 26th, asking for an estimated return date. Talbot's bank records showed no withdrawals or charges after September 27th, when he purchased fuel and food at a convenience store in Jasper, Arkansas. His credit cards were never used again. A subpoena for his email account revealed nothing beyond routine correspondence with editors and clients. There were no messages indicating distress, no references to suspicious activity, no contact with anyone in Newton County other than transactional exchanges at gas stations and supply stores. Hardin interviewed Talbot's colleagues and clients. All described him as reliable, professional, and skilled at navigating remote terrain. None recalled him mentioning plans to photograph anything other than landscapes. One editor noted that Talbot occasionally sold images to law enforcement agencies for training materials or public awareness campaigns, but that this was a minor part of his work. Another colleague mentioned that Talbot had once expressed frustration with illegal dumping he encountered in remote areas and had reported it to state environmental authorities. A review of those reports found 2 filings, one in 2007 and one in 2008, both related to construction debris dumped on Forest Service land. Neither report led to enforcement action. The recovery site of the memory card presented its own questions. Cutter's Bluff is not visible from County Road 3435. Reaching it requires either a strenuous hike up from Big Creek or a descent from the ridgeline, neither of which follows an established trail. Hardin consulted with a search and rescue coordinator who had participated in the original 2010 search. The coordinator confirmed that Cutter's Bluff had been included in the search grid, but that the terrain made thorough coverage impossible. The memory card was found wedged into a crack in the limestone face, approximately 15 feet above the Taylor slope. The hiker who discovered it had been climbing recreationally and noticed the corner of the card protruding from the rock. He initially thought it was litter. When he examined it more closely and saw it was a camera card, he turned it over to local authorities. Forensic analysis of the memory card itself revealed little. The card was a SanDisk Extreme Pro, a model commonly used by professional photographers. The serial number could not be traced to a point of sale. The damage to the card was consistent with prolonged exposure to moisture and temperature variation. The data recovery team noted that the card had likely been exposed to the elements for an extended period, possibly the entire interval between Talbot's disappearance in 2010 and the card's recovery in 2012. However, the location where it was found, wedged into a protected crevice, may have shielded it from the worst of the weather. This raised a troubling possibility. If Talbot had placed the card in the crevice deliberately, it suggested he knew he was in danger and wanted the images preserved. If the card had been placed there by someone else, it suggested an effort to remove evidence from Talbot's camera while ensuring the card would eventually be found, creating a permanent record of the event without leading investigators to a body or a crime scene. Hardin could not determine which scenario was correct. He noted in his case file that the placement of the card seemed inconsistent with accidental loss, but also inconsistent with an attempt to completely destroy evidence. Interviews with landowners and long-term residents in the area produced conflicting information. Some recalled seeing Talbot's truck parked at the clearing in late September. Others had no memory of it. One man mentioned that strangers asking questions had visited his property in early 2010, claiming to be conducting a timber survey. He became suspicious when they showed no interest in the trees and instead asked whether he had seen any vehicles or unfamiliar people in the area the previous fall. He declined to provide them with information and they did not return. He did not report the encounter to authorities because he assumed it was related to a private dispute. A former county sheriff's deputy who had retired in 2010 contacted Hardin in late 2012 after reading about the case in a regional newspaper. The deputy stated that he had been on patrol in the area in September 2010 and had encountered a man walking along County Road 3435 late one evening. The man was alone, on foot, and appeared disoriented. The deputy stopped to offer assistance. The man declined and stated he was returning to his vehicle. The deputy described the man as white, middle-aged, wearing outdoor clothing and carrying a backpack. He did not request identification and did not file a report because the encounter seemed routine. The deputy could not remember the exact date, but believed it was late in the month. When shown a photograph of Marcus Talbot, the deputy said the man resembled the individual he had encountered, but he could not be certain after so much time. Hardin attempted to verify this account by reviewing patrol logs and dispatch records from September 2010. The deputy's description of the encounter was not documented. Other deputies working that month could not recall similar incidents. Hardin included the information in his file, but noted that it could not be corroborated. If the man the deputy encountered was Talbot, it raised the question of why he was on foot, without his vehicle, and apparently disoriented. It also suggested he may have survived for a period after taking the photograph, long enough to distance himself from the scene, but not long enough to reach safety or contact authorities. By early 2013, Hardin had exhausted available leads. He submitted a comprehensive report to his supervisors outlining the evidence, the unresolved questions, and the obstacles to further progress. The report concluded that Marcus Talbot likely witnessed a criminal event on the night of September 28, 2010, and that his disappearance was connected to that event. However, without a crime scene, a body, or identifiable suspects, the case could not be advanced to prosecution. The file remains open, classified as a cold case under active review, but no investigative activity has been documented since Hardin's retirement in 2018. The prevailing theory among investigators is that Marcus Talbot encountered individuals engaged in illegal activity, documented that activity with his camera, and was subsequently killed to prevent him from reporting what he had seen. This theory is supported by the content of the photograph, the remote location, the nighttime timing, and Talbot's complete disappearance along with all his equipment. The difficulty with this theory is the absence of a known crime. If the photograph depicts a burial, the victim has never been identified. If the burial was connected to organized criminal activity, no group operating in the region in 2010 has been linked to the incident. The lack of human remains, despite searches, suggests either that the gravesite was not located or that remains were relocated after Talbot's disappearance. A second theory is that Talbot's disappearance was unrelated to the photograph. Proponents of this view argue that he may have been injured or incapacitated by natural causes, a fall, a medical event, or an animal encounter, and that the photograph, while unsettling, does not prove he was targeted. This theory struggles to explain why Talbot's body and equipment were never found, despite extensive searches. It also fails to account for the damaged memory card, which was recovered miles from his truck in a location that required deliberate effort to reach. If Talbot died from natural causes, the card should have been found with his remains. A third theory centers on the possibility that Talbot is alive and chose to disappear. Advocates of this view point to the absence of a body and the lack of direct evidence of foul play. They suggest that Talbot may have witnessed something so disturbing that he feared for his life and elected to vanish rather than report it. This theory is contradicted by his financial behavior, his lack of preparation for disappearing, and the statements of family and colleagues who described him as responsible and connected to his loved ones. Disappearing voluntarily would have required him to abandon his vehicle, his wallet, and his entire professional identity without accessing his bank accounts or contacting anyone he knew. Investigators find this scenario implausible. A more troubling theory, discussed quietly among those familiar with the case but not formally documented, is that Talbot was killed shortly after taking the photograph, and that his body was disposed of in the same manner as the individual he had photographed being buried. This would explain the complete absence of remains and the failure of search efforts. It would also explain why the memory card was separated from the camera and hidden in a location where it would eventually be found. If Talbot's killers discovered the camera and realized they had been photographed, they may have chosen to retain the card as a form of leverage or insurance, later disposing of it in a way that ensured the event would be documented but not traced. Local speculation has produced additional theories, most of them grounded in the region's history and culture. Newton County and the surrounding Ozark region have long been associated with illicit activities, moonshining in earlier decades, marijuana cultivation in the 1970s and 1980s, and methamphetamine production in more recent years. Some residents believe Talbot stumbled upon a drug operation and was killed to protect it. Others suggest he witnessed a retaliatory killing connected to disputes over territory or debt. These theories are plausible but unverified. Drug enforcement activity in the area in 2010 produced no arrests or seizures that align with the timing or location of Talbot's disappearance. Another line of speculation involves the private land parcel purchased by Belknap Resource Holdings. The fact that a corporate entity with no transparent ownership purchased a remote, landlocked tract of forested land months before Talbot disappeared has fueled suspicion that the property was used for illegal purposes. Some theories suggest the land was intended as a disposal site, either for waste or for bodies. Others propose it was used for clandestine meetings or transactions that required extreme isolation. Investigators have found no evidence to support these theories. The current owners of the property report no structures and no indications of prior use. However, the property has never been excavated, and significant portions remain inaccessible. A less conventional theory, advanced by some who live in the region, is that Talbot encountered something that cannot be easily categorized, an event or a group operating outside the boundaries of conventional criminal activity. This theory is difficult to evaluate because it is based on impressions rather than evidence. Residents describe the area as a place where people go when they do not want to be found, where questions are not asked, and where outsiders are not welcome. They note that the region's isolation and lack of infrastructure create conditions where individuals or groups can operate with little risk of detection. Talbot, as an outsider with a camera, may have crossed an invisible boundary and paid for it. The photograph itself has been analyzed repeatedly, but the analyses have produced no consensus. Some experts believe the image shows a burial in progress. Others argue it could depict the excavation of something previously buried or the preparation of a site for future use. The figure on the ground has been interpreted as a body, as a person lying voluntarily, or as an object covered by fabric. The lack of resolution and the poor lighting make definitive conclusions impossible. What is clear is that the activity was conducted at night in a remote location by individuals who took care to minimize visibility and detection. What remains unexplained is why Marcus Talbot, an experienced outdoorsman familiar with the risks of the Ozark backcountry, would approach close enough to photograph the activity and why he would remain long enough to take a clear shot. Some suggest he did not realize the danger until it was too late. Others believe he made a deliberate choice to document the event despite the risk, driven by a sense of responsibility or outrage. His final text message, "Found something, will explain when I get signal," suggests he intended to report what he had seen, but needed to return to an area with cell coverage first. He never made it back. The file on Marcus Talbot occupies a place in the cold case unit's archives that defies easy categorization. It is classified as a missing person case, but investigators treat it as a homicide. It is supported by photographic evidence, but that evidence cannot be tied to a specific location, victim, or suspect. It involves a witness who disappeared, a crime that may or may not have occurred, and a landscape that conceals as much as it reveals. Talbot's truck was eventually released to his family. His mother kept it for 2 years before selling it. His camera equipment was never recovered. The memory card, after being processed and analyzed, was returned to the family. They placed it in a safety deposit box alongside other personal effects. His sister has stated publicly that she believes her brother was killed, but that she does not expect his body will ever be found. She has requested that the case remain open and that any new information be pursued regardless of how much time has passed. The clearing where Talbot parked his truck is unchanged. The forest has reclaimed the tire ruts. Leaves and debris have erased the signs of his presence. The road is still used occasionally, mostly during hunting season. County Road 3435 remains unmaintained, and plans to pave or improve it have not been proposed. The land purchased by Belknap Resource Holdings has changed ownership twice more since 2013. The current owners are a family trust based in Missouri. They have no plans to develop the property and have allowed it to return to full forest cover. Cutter's Bluff, where the memory card was found, is known among local climbers but rarely visited. The approach is difficult, and the climbing routes are not documented in guidebooks. The limestone face is unstable in places, and rockfall is common. The hiker who found the card has not returned to the area. He has stated in interviews that he wishes he had left the card where it was. He did not expect his discovery to reopen wounds or to generate attention he did not seek. Theories about what happened to Marcus Talbot continue to circulate among those who follow unsolved cases. Online forums devoted to missing persons have dissected the photograph, analyzed the timeline, and proposed scenarios ranging from plausible to absurd. Some believe the case will eventually be solved through advancements in forensic technology or through a deathbed confession. Others argue that the remoteness of the location and the passage of time have made resolution impossible. Investigators who worked the case acknowledge that without a body, a witness, or a break in the form of new evidence, the file will remain where it is, open but inactive. The photograph taken on September 28, 2010, remains the most significant piece of evidence and the most haunting. It captures a moment that occurred in near-total isolation, witnessed by one man who documented it and then vanished. The identities of the figures in the photograph are unknown. The location of the clearing has not been definitively established. The individual on the ground, if that is what the shape represents, has never been identified or reported missing in a way that connects to the case. The event exists as a frozen image, a fragment of something larger that cannot be reconstructed from the available facts. Investigators have noted that the Ozark region, for all its beauty, contains countless places where events can occur without witness, where graves can be dug without discovery, and where people can vanish as completely as if they had never existed. The combination of rugged terrain, sparse population, limited infrastructure, and a culture that values privacy and discourages questions creates an environment where certain things are simply absorbed by the landscape and never released. Marcus Talbot became part of that landscape in late September 2010. Whether through misfortune, miscalculation, or deliberate action by others, he crossed a line from which he could not return. The file remains open, the photograph remains unexplained, the forest remains silent. And in the hollows and ridges of the Boston Mountains, where the limestone bluffs rise above unnamed creeks and the oak trees grow thick over ground that has not been walked in years, the answers, if they exist at all, are buried as deeply as whatever Marcus Talbot saw on that September night. Some stories were never meant to be uncovered. Welcome to Northern Mystery Archives. Here, we don't soften the truth, and we don't skip the details. We investigate the forgotten files from the far north of Canada, the disappearances that were quietly shelved, the settlements that faded from every map, the transmissions that were never meant to be heard again. In this channel, nothing is hidden. Every fragment, every silence, every erased trail is examined with the seriousness these cases deserved but never received. If you value cold, atmospheric, minimalist investigations into the unexplained wilderness of the North, you're in the right place. Subscribe, stay close, and step with us into the files they hoped no one would ever revisit.